Okay, Congressman, you had a town hall. What was this town hall all about?
Well, it's actually something that was set up by a nonprofit group that's going around trying to do town halls, ironically, to try to increase civil discourse, basically. So they want to try to get people into an environment where you can have a civil conversation about important issues. So they reach out to my constituents, identify a group, and then do a lottery. They pick 50 to come in and have a conversation about a specific issue. Public safety was going to be the conversation. And then the group shows up about a half hour before I do. They have some initial questions, sort of frame it, and then I show up and have an hour-long conversation. But by the time I showed up, we had heard that there were people disrupting the event. Later learned that it was Kshama Sawant's campaign manager and her husband, and I gather, I don't know, about 10 or so of her supporters who had showed up at the site. I don't know how they found out about it, but they did.
So when you say disruption, what does that mean?
Well, they showed up and there were Renton police there, and they were told, hey, okay, if you want to do your thing, you can do your thing over here. And so they were doing it and chanted, and then they just basically barged into the meeting room where my constituents were and shoved aside a couple of my staff members in doing it and got into the meeting room and started yelling at the people in there. And this is all before I showed up.
So they were uninvited?
Yeah, they were uninvited. I mean, people want to. It was a designated group. The uninvited part of it wasn't the important part. The important part was the screaming and physically shoving people aside to get into the meeting room that was part of the problem. So
I've seen the video and I've seen the pictures, so I'll preface this, but when you say they shoved their way into the room, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, we had a table set up where people were supposed to sign in, and there was a door that led into, it was at Renton Technical College, and they showed up and they said, sorry, you're not on the list. This is a, private event, and they ignored that, and my staff was standing in front of the door and they pushed him to the side and walked in.
What did your staff members say about what was said to her before they did that?
I don't recall exactly. I mean, like I said, I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what was exchanged.
Based on the police report that I've seen, it does appear that she was injured.
Yeah, she was physically pushed. There wasn't any profound injury, but it was really, it shook her up emotionally. I mean, you're here at a public town hall meeting, you got someone in your face screaming at you and then physically shoving you to the side. I mean, public servants shouldn't have to put up with that.
What transpired after that, after they had pushed their way in and started
well,
yelling?
as they do, they were standing in there screaming at everybody, making sure that only their voices were heard because they think they know absolutely everything. And we had a conversation with the police about what could be done, and they could be removed because they were trespassing. They were on property without permission. I spoke to the president of Renton Technical College, and she didn't want to have them arrested. So we shut down the meeting and ended it. And I guess after that, the people who had disrupted the meeting were walking out, and then they turned around and went back in for some reason. And that's when I can't remember, it was 2 or 3 got arrested for trespassing at that point.
What does this say about this campaign already? I mean, we're talking about a campaign. We're not even into the full cycle.
Got a year to go, yes.
Yeah.
No, I think, look, it says something about politics in general. We can't just have civil conversations anymore. And I've tried to have a couple town hall meetings before this. I've had different events that have been disrupted by people who come in and scream at everybody there. I had an academy night where we bring in high school students to talk to them about if they want to join, apply to the service academies. And a group of these people showed up and started screaming at high school students. It wasn't a discussion. We tried to move it out in the hall. They go out in the hall and shout at them. In my town hall meetings, it's the same thing. I mean, they will literally scream a question at me. I get 2 words out of my mouth and they start screaming at me again. I mean, this is not an effort to win an argument. This is an effort to use threats and intimidation to silence any opposition so that only your point of view gets heard. It is completely anti-democracy, and it's a real threat to our country, to our ability to have a representative democracy where we get together, talk about issues, disagree, argue in a civil way. And that's not the purpose of this. And it's happened to me and to my staff on a number of occasions over the course of the last several years.
This same group has been disrupting?
It's a couple of different groups. My staff has more of a sort of detailed knowledge of who these people are than I do. A couple different groups, but similar people.
Playing the skeptic here, I mean, why shouldn't they be allowed into this room even if they didn't sign up for it or weren't invited?
Well, two things about that. I mean, first of all, you do have to be able to have meetings where this is the group of people you're going to talk to. And I have met with some of these groups many times before over the course of my career. It's not the case that I say, no, I'm not going to meet with you. We've met with them in my office, met with them in different places. Heck, I did a town hall meeting that they wanted me to do on an issue surrounding the Philippines at a church in Southeast Seattle that they ran. And I showed up and participated in. I struggled to get a word in edgewise during the course of that conversation, but I did show up. So I'm perfectly accessible. The reason it's a problem is because, again, they are silencing everybody else. They are silencing and intimidating any other voice. It's not unlike the University of Washington when they tried to have the Regents meeting to discuss the Israel issue. And the first 3 or so people who testified in favor of divesting. Then one person got up and tried to testify on the other side. Wouldn't let that person talk. Got a sentence in and they started screaming. That is an effort to silence and intimidate and use threats to get your way. It's not an effort to win a persuadable argument. And look, if you want to sit and have conversations, and I've had tough conversations, as I like to say, over the course of 36 years of doing this in one capacity or another, I've irritated a lot of people, with my votes, things I've said that they didn't like, and they show up at meetings and they're fired up. And I've had those conversations. I've been able to do it because I'm respectful. This group is in a different category. They have no interest whatsoever in hearing anybody else's voices, and they are threatening and intimidating. Part of their effort here is to scare people into doing what they want. And that's a big problem for democracy. As you know, they've shown up at my home, they've vandalized my home. It's all about threats and intimidation. And I know this because this is coming from people on the political left. And this next comment I'm going to make drives them insane. But it's not really that different than what the MAGA people did on January 6th back in Washington, D.C. They were going to use threats and intimidation in order to get their way instead of working through the process and using normal argumentation.
So what do you think should happen in this case? I know the Renton police were recommending 4th-degree assault charges against Calvin Priest, who is Kshama's husband.
Yeah, I think they should absolutely be charged, and I'm glad Renton did. I am a little bit frustrated that the King County Prosecutor's Office in some instances has not found a way to file charges against the people who have done similar things at the University of Washington or who shut down the airport. You commit a crime, you ought to be charged. Now, part of that is if you believe passionately enough in your cause, then okay, you think it warrants that level of disruption. But a crime's a crime, and we have to enforce the rules in civil society, or sooner or later there are no rules, and chaos descends.
I can hear that group perhaps saying, hey, this is a free speech issue. We're just trying to get in there and make our voice heard.
Well, what they're trying, no, they are trying to get in there and silence any other voice. That's what they're trying to do. They're not trying to make their voice heard. There's 1,000 different ways for them to make their voices heard. And as I said, I've met with them. They've got a whole bunch of different vehicles. But when you don't let anybody else speak, when you scream at them and threaten them, you're not trying to make your voice heard. You're trying to make sure that no other voice gets heard. And that is not what a democracy is supposed to be about.